So when does your business need to start a search project?
Whenever you have a significant amount of documents which have to be reachable by users without actually traversing all of them, that's the right time to start your search project. So one example of this search project might be a e-commerce site. Here documents are represented by shopping items. These items could be found by simply traversing a catalog tree or either entering a search keyword in the specific search area and getting a relevant result set. Another example might be, for example, a web content search engine, which provide you an access to some specific content which you either generate yourself or aggregate from some third-party sources, like film reviews, news, and recipes, for example, or flight bookings even, or hotels. Documents could be either well-structured or unstructured. Structured documents contain different fields like description, title, image, text, or some specific fields like colors or price. Unstructured documents are just mixture of image and free text. So whenever we do process this data for search engine, we usually prefer structured data, which are easier to process, filter, and prioritize.
First, we can split search engine into different categories. One of them is structured search engines, and the other one is unstructured search engines. Example of unstructured search engines are news sites, science paper sites, and e-commerce search. There are also behavioral search engines. These are recommendation tools and infinite playlists, feeds. And the last category is unconventional search engines. The example of the last categories are face recognition tools, reverse image search. So, if your business falls into one of these categories, you can definitely think of a search engine. Users are going to easily and quickly find information without going through irrelevant numerous links.
How does a search engine work?
The main concept around search is index. Index is a data structure which maps possible keywords to a set of documents. Once user enter a query, significant keywords are extracted from this query, and index is used to quickly fetch relevant documents which contain those keywords.
Here we can mention two important concepts, precision and recall. Basically, recall means show at least what you should, and precision means don't show what you shouldn't. So, in other words, if you have too much recall, then you have what you want, but you have also a ton of unwanted stuff. And too much precision means you don't have any unwanted stuff, but you are also missing a lot of things that you want.
So, after the documents are retrieved, we have to prioritize them so that most relevant documents appear at the top of the list. This process is called ranking. How do we measure relevance between documents and query? The process of collecting historical data of queries sent and how users interacted with those results help us to understand which queries are more relevant. Those which have more clicks have higher rank and appear higher on the top of the search result list. Here comes into play one more system, it's analytics system, which helps us to collect the data. But you have to be very careful not to break any GDPR rule here.
To sum up, you can think of a search request like a pipeline of multiple steps. First, the query needs to be cleaned up, spell fixed, then we normalize the query. We want to have a consistent behavior for queries like table and tables. After that, we retrieve products, documents, and in the final step, we rank them.
Modern search engines are not exclusively using keyword-based search, but rather try to guess user intention and sentiments and answer the question even if resulting document does not contain any keywords matching the query itself. Those state-of-the-art technologies imply using machine learning for natural language processing.
You mentioned precision and recall and their role, but how do you know the threshold you select is correct and that they're basically good enough?
At the end of the day, it's business purpose which have to be served by search engine. So business goal have to be measured.
In the e-commerce business, you probably want to show user relevant results, and relevant results means happy users and it drives revenue. Every experiment you do should lead to improving your business. And you know if an experiment is improving your business by looking at the metrics. You need to carefully analyze them and take decisions based on these metrics.
After the search project went into production, what are the next optimizations and how do you assess their impact?
Okay, whenever we have a functioning system and we would like to apply some changes, for example, ranking improvement, we usually launch an A/B test. Some users will continue observing old behavior, while others are directed to the updated one. Collected statistics will help us to understand if change is positive or not. Worth mentioning here that we have to guarantee consistent behavior of application for the same user during the test life cycle. Also, A/B tests should be conducted during the considerable amount of time so that we are getting metric significance rather than temporary data fluctuation.
This is really important to have a good way of measuring impact. I believe that decision on which elements should be part of the formula in ranking should be dictated by data outcomes. We can come up with a lot of ideas how to improve the search engine, but we should verify these ideas with the metrics from A/B tests.
Speaking of improvements, can you please describe them in a little bit more details? What categories do they fall into? And can you please show us some examples?
We can start with the easiest to imagine. For example, you want to introduce some stock availability real-time information in the region where it haven't had been before. That's significant work, but is it worth doing? We have to measure it. Or, for example, you might wish to promote some specific products to appear among the top search results, but you have to observe metrics such as click-through rate, add to cart, revenue, or positional clicks in order to understand whether it's worth doing or not.
NLP is another technique, so you don't rely on keywords. It's not intuitive for a human being, but instead you aim to understand the semantic of the question. Last but not least, machine learning could be used, for instance, for improving the search order. We can start from the simplest model, like decision trees for tabular data. When we realize it's promising, we can work on more complex ones, such as blending together models processing different types of data, for instance, mixing NLP with image processing. Apart from search order, we can also apply machine learning to classify queries. We can, for example, display different layouts for different query types. To illustrate that, let's take a kitchen query. This is a room query, it's a really broad query, and machine learning can help us classifying that query into a room category. Whenever we have a room search, we can display different layout to help user and guide him into specific categories and show him more relevant products.
What are the other components which make search page more efficient for the users?
Autocomplete component is aimed to provide query suggestions and save some typing effort. In the meantime, it might help user to select some specific query, which helps to narrow down his search and not explore too broad results. Also, it might be useful to render some related searches and autocorrected ones. Those are created from the historical data about queries' sense and their popularity.
One of the first steps in search request is query normalization. Under the hood, we remove diacritics, change the query to lowercase, do some stemming, add synonyms to particular queries. This is going to reduce noise and search results are going to be more consistent. It's really important to have good observability on metrics on our search engine. Even if some queries don't work perfectly, they might be used a couple of times per day, but the other queries, they are used thousands of times a day, and these are the ones we should focus on first.
What affects the implementation cost?
There are actually several enterprise search platforms like Solr or Elasticsearch, which are considered de facto standard. Those off-shelf solutions provide some basic functionality, search functionality, but still have to be somehow customized for specific application needs. The search service runs separately in a standalone or cloud mode with the ability to quickly scale up whenever a load is rising. For example, in case your application is gaining popularity or some temporary events like Black Friday for e-commerce. Those solutions are easy to launch, but sometimes they might not fully satisfy your needs. Sometimes you have more demanding use case, for example, whenever you have a huge data set or when every millisecond matter. Still in this case, when you modify this off-shelf solution, you have to understand what is happening under the hood. But some companies decide to build their own search engine. It will be optimized for specific data, its amount, structure, update frequency, but of course it requires more development effort before the launch.
When we are using cloud provider, we should also apply some best practices on how to choose the correct products that the cloud provider offers. At the beginning, it might look like it doesn't matter, but in the long run, the code might become unmaintainable if we screw up at the beginning. There are many important points, like having a good observability, notifications, and infrastructure as a code, for example. We should create some dashboards to increase observability and set up some notifications when things go down unintentionally. Monitoring costs is an ongoing process, and the entire team should be aware at which products we spend the most money on. We can also draw some charts with the cost divided by each service that the cloud providers offers. We can also divide the cost by project or by the team.
What do I need to know before meeting a search engine expert?
To have a clear understanding on what you are optimizing your search engine for. Of course, we'll ask you questions which guide you through the process. If it's already existing search engine, it's good to have a summary of how it's implemented so far and how the process of modifying it looks like. If you invest into optimization, it must be clear that it brings expected results.
That's very important. It would be great if you collect data, run A/B tests, and have appropriate metrics. If you don't, you should definitely think about having it in place before doing any significant development.
At the end, what sort of maintenance is needed? Do you need to check it regularly? Does it have to be a search expert? Or it run by itself?
Robust system implies having continuous integration and delivery, automating as much as possible, infrastructure as a code, and monitoring.
Yes, that makes maintenance much easier and limits manual operations. On the other hand, work is very dynamic. There are many changes, COVID to name one, which affects many businesses. That's why we should pay attention to metrics we are collecting and be open to modify the softwares to fit new reality.
So, to wrap up,
there are various means by which you can improve your search engine, like improving data cleanup or normalization or modifying a ranking algorithm. But before starting any experiments, you should definitely consider setting up a proper A/B test system and define metrics to understand if you are moving in the right direction.